It's all in your head. You don't look sick. Your tests are normal. It's probably anxiety. There's nothing wrong with you. Have you heard these words from physicians, family, and friends? If you're someone who has been swirling through the revolving door of healthcare to find answers about your health, or if you know someone who is going through this experience, then this podcast is for you. Welcome to the Desperate for a Diagnosis podcast with Laura Nozicka. Hello and welcome to the Desperate for a Diagnosis podcast. I'm your host, Laura Nozicka, and today I have with me such a lovely lady, and I am so happy that she was able to join me today. And she was supposed to join me last week, but unfortunately she had some illness spread through her household, and you got to make family first. So I totally understand and so glad that Ambreen Maan is here with me today. And she and I met, I think it was the end of March, if I recall. And I attended an AYA, which stands for, if I'm correct, Ambreen, Adolescent and Young Adult. Is that right?
Yep, you got it.
Okay. It was an AYA Chicago event for young cancer survivors, and it's an amazing community, everyone. If you've never heard about it, I will have Ambreen tell us more about the AYA community and her journey with a cancer diagnosis at such a young age. And here she is, just beautiful and here to tell us about it. But I attended the AYA event with Matthew Zachary, and some of you may remember that Matt was on my show not that long ago, and he just so happened to be in town because the rock star that he was one of the keynote speakers for the event, and he and Ambreen actually had a conversation on stage. And so when she was telling her story, I thought, oh my goodness, I need to have this beauty on my show and talking with us about her experience. So let me tell you a little bit about Ambreen, and then we'll get rolling and we'll hear from her. Ambreen has worked in the cancer advocacy space for the past 10 years, inspired by the personal experiences that she has had as a cancer survivor and caregiver. She is dedicated to reducing barriers to care and improving health equity with a focus on historically marginalized groups. She is a licensed social worker and received her master's in social work, specializing in nonprofit management and healthcare from Aurora University. She currently serves as the program manager at the American Brain Tumor Association, where she is currently leading their AYA initiative to serve, support, and amplify the voices of the AYA brain tumor community. Again, Ambreen, thank you so much for being with me today. I'm so excited to talk with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to get to share more of my background and what I'm doing now in the AYA space.
Wow, I love it. Tell us a little bit about, why don't we talk a little bit first about the AYA community, because you are doing so much, and we'll talk about who that community serves, and then talk a little bit about your experiences, because so much of our experiences lead into all these amazing journeys, other journeys and forks in the road, and things branch off to other cool things that we're doing, and you are doing so many amazing things. So tell us a little bit about the AYA community.
Yeah, well, thanks for saying that because I agree. I think we make our own plans, but life has other plans for us, and
True.
sometimes it turns out for the best, no matter how hard or challenging those experiences can be. So, like you mentioned earlier, AYA stands for Adolescent and Young Adult Cancer Patients and Survivors. This demographic is between the ages of 15 to 39, and this really came to the forefront, I would say, in the past decade or so. And the reason why we, or me specifically, my career has been focused on this demographic is because they are often slipping through the cracks. And that's really what the AYA advocacy movement is all about, is amplifying the experiences of those adolescents and young adults that are going through cancer, what their unique needs are, why they're so different from pediatric patients and older adult patients, and bringing that to the forefront, for from a healthcare perspective as well as an advocacy perspective to ensure that they have the support and resources that are specific to them and what they're going through. Someone is an adolescent or a young adult, they're starting to figure out who they are. They're starting to gain independence. They might be in starting college, they might be starting their careers, starting important, impactful relationships, building families. So they have all these different things that are happening that is so different from a young child and an older adult who may be more established in their life. They may already have that defining moment, what they're doing. When you add on top of that a cancer diagnosis, it really just changes the game for them. They kind of have to hit pause on life. A lot of young adults and adolescents end up having to move back in with their parents when they were starting to just gain some of that independence. It's a really difficult time frame, and it is an age range where really there weren't as many resources that were specific for them, talking about what that unique experience is like. And that's why organizations like Stupid Cancer that Matthew Zachary founded are so important because they really amplify those voices. They bring more awareness to what this demographic is going through and why it's so important for us as advocates, as healthcare providers, to ensure that the support we're providing is tailored specifically for that demographic as well.
Mhm.
And I really became passionate about this as a young adult cancer survivor myself. I had that firsthand experience of seeing exactly what it's like being a young patient, finding out that you have cancer. I was 19 when I was diagnosed, so I was just starting my sophomore year of college, and it was very isolating 'cause none of your peers have, or very few, have gone through an experience like that that's so traumatic and life-changing and, being taken out of the your life as a college student where you're attending classes, socializing, having fun, and now all of a sudden you're in the hospital, you're getting chemotherapy, you're losing your hair. You're not getting to engage with your peers in your life the way that you thought you would. And it was hard, especially when you see your friends and your peers moving forward with their life the way that you thought you would be going through as well. It can be really isolating and hard until you find that community, and that's why I think that AYA's Take Chicago event that we both met at was so impactful for the patients.
The event was incredible. I don't even know what more I could say about it, but you could just feel um, the passion across, just everyone that was there and the enthusiasm for the group, and it really, there's so many tight-knit communities out there. I'm sure that this is one of them.
Definitely, yeah, everyone in the AYA space, we tend to say, like, it's the club you don't want to join, but once you are in it, it's such a beautiful community, it's so supportive. It is tight-knit, I feel like everyone ends up knowing each other, and it's just wonderful to see the connections that get made, and it's just that moment that you see in a patient or survivor's eyes where they no longer feel like they're the odd one out, like you're the friend that has cancer, or, you're that kid that had cancer. You look around the room at an event like AYA's Take Chicago, and everyone's the same, and it's just such a good feeling to not feel like you're the odd one out and to know that there's a community out there that has been in your shoes and is going through the same thing.
Mhm. Yeah, and one of the and I don't remember what her name was, but there was a young girl that stood on stage, and I think she had lost her sister. I don't recall to what cancer, but she said something about, and I wrote it down, but I don't recall exactly how she said it from memory, but she said something around the point of to kind of revel in the mundane things of every day, because you never realize when those are really the big moments in life, in terms of how she was thinking about the loss of her sister. And how do you relate that back to young cancer survivors, or a young person who's going through treatment or recently was diagnosed, when I'm sure the weight of the world is so heavy on you and your family at that point too. How do you how do you try to get young people with cancer to think that way or to stay hopeful or to think about the future in all those things that you thought you would do and hope you would do? And like you said, like whatever God you believe in, then they say you make plans and God laughs, something like that. Yeah. But
Yeah.
how do you talk with young cancer patients or survivors to be hopeful?
Yeah, that's a great question, and really, it's different for everyone. For some people, it comes quickly. It comes right from the point of diagnosis. They're feeling that sense of hope, while others, it takes them a long time to get to that point, and I think the first piece of it is validating how they're feeling and meeting them where they're at, letting them know that, "Yeah, this does suck. You have cancer and you're young, and there really is no reason this happened." I think a lot of us, when we are diagnosed with cancer and we're going through this, we try to figure out, why is this happening to me? Like, what did I do to deserve this? And the truth of the matter is, there isn't a reason. Cancer is something that happens to us, but it's not something that's in our control. And rather than focusing on why this happened, it's important for us to focus on, what can we do now? What is still in our control? We can't control that we have this diagnosis, that we have to go through these treatments, that we're feeling this way physically. But what we can control is the small things. And I think, just like that woman who spoke on stage said, it's focusing on the mundane and the little things that are still in your control. I think when we think about adolescents and young adults, part of the challenge is they're no longer able to do some of the things that they used to do, or at least they can't do it the same way. So when I'm working with young patients, I will often talk to them about their values, what's most important to them, um, and what they feel like they've lost. I think it's really important to name what you're feeling. And when we think about loss, we often think about death. But loss is so much more than that. It can be, the loss of the future that you had planned for yourself, the loss of a hobby if you're not able to do it anymore because of the type of side effects or cancer that you have. And naming that grief is so important, because it helps these young patients to take the time that they need to go through that grief, recognize that this is what they're experiencing is grief, and that, yes, they have lost things along the way. And once they're able to understand that emotional aspect of it and work through those emotions, then they can start to build up towards that rebuilding, rediscovering themselves, and finding ways to still find enjoyment, find ways to do what they love, or find new things. Like for me, when I was before I was diagnosed, I always thought I wanted to be a doctor. Like, I had it all planned out. And after going through this, I really fell in love with social work. And it was because of those experiences that I went through, my interactions with social workers, how impactful they were for my own diagnosis. And later, I was a caregiver for my father. And they were just truly like the unsung heroes of the cancer experience. And it just completely changed my plans, and it's something I never would have considered for myself. I was adamant that I was gonna go to med school, and I did try after I finished treatments and I started classes again. I, went back to my pre-med courses, and I couldn't study the same way. Like, chemo brain really impacted me, and it was just a lot harder, and it was difficult initially. Like, the studying and schooling, it was something that always came easy for me, and all of a sudden it was a huge challenge. And it did impact me mentally, because it was hard to realize I can't do things the same way. But when I realized my passion had also changed, the gears started turning again, and I was able to focus my time and energy on something that I thought was even more important, and that was more of that psychosocial aspect of cancer and healthcare instead.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's something how what we thought was the right thing for us maybe really wasn't, and there I don't know, you might be a little young to know a lot about the Rolling Stones, but there is a song that you can't always get what you want, but you get what you need, and so we never really know what that is until we're we're faced with it and get to that threshold. But I think that's out of just, like you said, it's a club you never want to be in, but to embrace where you were and how things changed for you, I think really is the coolest thing, Ambreen. So I'm so glad that you found this home, and clearly it's a passion for you in helping and shepherding young people through the process and through their journey. I think that's so cool. Um, but why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey and how it started? Because I want to get to talking too about what did you find out or learn about the healthcare system and being a patient at such a young age? Because I think as young people, I was a young person at one point in time. I don't think we ever think about, oh, what it's like to have to go to the doctor. All you know is maybe as a kid, you go to your pediatrician and they're giving you these shots, or you got tonsillitis or cold or flu, whatever. Kind of the everyday sort of things that kids get. But I don't think as a kid we ever think about these really heavy, serious healthcare encounters, these journeys that we never stop and think, oh, well, if that happened to me, I'd probably handle it this way. We don't know until we get there, unfortunately. Um, and so I'd love to get your perspective on, as a young person, what you're thinking about the healthcare system. Clearly, it turned your track career wise in a different direction. But tell us a little bit about your journey and your diagnosis and what that was like for you and your family.
Yeah, well, I'll say the biggest lesson I learned being thrown into this healthcare space as a patient is doctors are the medical experts for sure, but you are the expert when it comes to yourself and your body. And that was a hard lesson to learn being a young patient, because I think when you're younger, doctors are kind of like up here. They're on this like pedestal, and you think that they know everything, and you go to them and you tell them your problems and you just follow along with whatever they say. And that's how I was going into this. It actually took me a year to get to the point of my diagnosis. I started getting sick a year prior to finding out about having cancer. And I was having a lot of symptoms that now, looking back and knowing what I know now about the type of cancer I had, were pretty typical for my diagnosis. I didn't know it at that time. And I had been going to the doctor this entire time when I started feeling off. I was having fevers. I had this weird rash that wouldn't go away that I didn't understand. Um,
And Breen, what kind of doctors were you going to at that point?
Yeah, at that time, I was going to my primary care physician, so just my regular doctor that I would go to for checkups.
Okay.
And
So you had advanced already from pediatrician to a adult primary care physician, or
yeah, so the way that my hospital at that time was set up is our internal physicians and our pediatricians were all under one clinic.
okay.
So yeah, I was still seeing basically the same doctor I had seen since I was a child, but they just had everyone under the same umbrella.
Got it.
So yeah, I would go see him, I would say what was going on, what I was feeling, and it would just continue to get brushed under the rug as, "Okay, you just have a cold. You have this rash because you're allergic to mosquitoes, or it's pollen season, and that's why you're experiencing this." And I would just kinda nod my head and be like, "Yeah, that makes sense," and follow their instructions, and nothing would get better. I would just keep feeling sicker and sicker, and it was hard because I didn't understand why this is happening. I was doing everything right, I was eating healthy, I was exercising, I was going to the doctor like I should when I'm not feeling good, but I still wasn't feeling good. And it got to the point where, I had this really bad back pain that developed, and it wouldn't go away. And I went back to my doctor again, said, "Hey, my back is hurting now on top of all these other symptoms I've been experiencing." And I was told, because keep in mind, I was a sophomore at that time in college, so I was carrying a backpack with a lot of books. So they said, "Well, you're going to school, your textbooks are heavy. Maybe get a rolly bag or don't carry as many textbooks anymore and your back won't be hurting as much." So I just said, "Okay, I'll do that." So I got a rolly bag and stopped carrying as many textbooks, and of course, that back pain didn't go away. Um, I will add, that I am very lucky that I have family who has some background in healthcare. My sister, is a clinical lab scientist, so she was kinda this was, like, top of mind for her. She's like, "This is not normal, something is wrong." So she was really advocating for me to get an MRI, and my doctors at that time just wouldn't do it. They're like, You're too young, you don't need an MRI. We're telling you your back is just hurting because you're carrying too many books." Eventually, it got to the point that that back pain got so bad that it started in my lower spine, it would shoot up, and basically caused my whole chest to tighten up, and I felt like I couldn't breathe, and I ended up going to the ER, and I was hospitalized, and I was in the hospital for 2 months while they tried to figure out what was going on, still couldn't figure it out. Um, Unfortunately, I had a doctor who was the head of my case when I was, hospitalized who was really not the best, and this is where my background comes into play as well, being, a person of color, as well, and my doctor, he looked at me and just assumed that he knew what was wrong, and he was sold on the fact that he thought I had malaria. And every time he would come into my hospital room to check on me, he wouldn't even look up, wouldn't make eye contact with me. He would just look down on his clipboard and ask me, "When can you remind me when was the last time you left the country?" And at that time, I hadn't traveled much at all. I had only gone probably to Canada and to other states. And I would tell him, just like I told you last time, I haven't gone anywhere. And he would be asking this because given my background, I'm Pakistani, he would assume that I had been to India or Pakistan where I probably got malaria and that's why I'm so sick. Keep in mind that none of my tests showed anything related to malaria, but he was just sold on that and he wouldn't order the correct tests that I needed that would have diagnosed my cancer right away. Um, and I was lucky that there was another doctor in the hospital at the time who was also, same background as me. She was Pakistani and Muslim, and she noticed what was going on, and she's like, "This doctor is not handling your case properly. You need to get out of here. You need to transfer to, a different hospital." I was at a community hospital that was local to my area, and she actually helped to get everything set up for me to transfer to a larger institution. Um Everything was set up, I was ready to go, the ambulance was downstairs waiting for me, they brought the bed out to transfer me, and the doctor showed up. And I was in my room at the time where the nurse was, like, unattaching my IVs and all that, and I just hear them arguing outside where he was fighting with the nurses and the other doctors there that, "Don't take her, I'm telling you, I know what's going on, she doesn't need to be transferred." It was such a frightening experience, and I'm just so lucky that there were other people there who advocated for me and pushed for me, and I was able to transfer that same night, and within 2 days, I found out, that I had cancer after I
Oh,
transferred to the other hospital, and, it turned out I had stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma, and that pain that was, uh, being caused in my back was caused by a tumor that had formed along my spine, and because it had been such a long time, that my cancer had progressed so much, the tumor started, growing, and it caused a fracture on my spine and was growing into the fracture and causing it to get worse and worse. Because of that, I had to start treatment right away. They wanted to, get me on chemo right away so they can try to minimize the effects of that fracture and let my spine start to heal. So it was a whirlwind. It was crazy to me how long it took to get to that point of finding out my diagnosis, to go through so much just to be taken seriously, first of all, and then to be given the right tests and the appropriate care to figure out what was going on.
oh my gosh, Ambreen, what a harrowing experience. And for the doctor to say malaria, oh my gosh. What was his specialty, that physician?
He was an infectious disease.
So you are saying the completely wrong specialty
Mm.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he wasn't working for any kind of cancer or blood disorder necessarily, or he wasn't a hematologist. He wasn't, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that's
And it it's funny because multiple times during that 2-month stay at that smaller community hospital, I was told, "Well, whatever it is, we can't figure it out, but at least it's not cancer." And, turned out it was cancer.
oh my gosh. But did they even test you at all for any kind of cancer?
I mean, they did multiple tests, like blood work, different types of scans. It was just the type of biopsies that I needed, the type of scans I needed were different from what they were. And it really all stemmed from that one doctor who was the head of my case, kind of taking control and, having that ego of, I know what this is, so we're going to do it this way. There were there were nurses, other doctors who were seeing that, this doctor wasn't handling it correctly, and I'm grateful for them because they really advocated to me, and again, I'm so grateful for my sister because she also kind of knew that something else was going on here, and she was starting to connect the dots, and even after I transferred, to the other hospital, she helped me so much in just understanding what all of this meant. I have a big family, and they all are so amazing. They really were my biggest supports as I was going through this. I never had to go to any of my appointments alone or my chemo sessions alone, and it was just so helpful to have somebody else there because it's not just you reporting what you're feeling and what you're going through, but someone else who can kinda help you. Because when you are that sick, it's really hard sometimes to just keep track of what you're going through, what you're experiencing, what you're feeling. So it's helpful to have someone else there, and sometimes you're just too tired and too sick to speak up for yourself, so having a friend or family member that can support you and be by your side for those appointments, I think makes such a big difference.
Uh-huh. Oh my goodness. Yeah, we talk so much about on my show about just your gut and going with your gut and your intuition when you're not getting what you need and you're getting sicker and you keep asking the questions and pushing for answers and you're not getting it. Something has to change. You have to make some decisions and they might be difficult decisions, but you have to make decisions. But wow, how blessed for you that you had this angel of a physician who was keeping an eye out for you and knew that you weren't getting the right answers and the right tests. And so here you get to a larger organization. I'm assuming with more experience maybe than what the community hospital had, or just for maybe more aggressive in getting you tested. Um, Now you get this diagnosis, and who was with you, and what goes through your mind in those split seconds hearing lymphoma? And you said stage 4, is that right?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, just because it to get to that point, like, by this time, it was a year of me just feeling off and feeling sick and feeling worse and worse. When I found out, it was kind of a relief that now at least I have a name for this. I know what this is, and knowing what it is means that we can start treating it and moving forward with doing what we can to try to get me feeling better. It's kind of funny because and because they didn't know what I had, and at this time, swine flu was also a big thing, so anytime the doctors, nurses would come into my room to visit me, they would have masks on, a gown on, everything. And this time, the doctor came in and he wasn't wearing a mask or a gown, and he's like, "Did you notice anything?" And I was like, "You're not wearing a mask. What's going on?" And then that's when he sat down and said, "We got the results from your biopsy and, it's nothing infectious." And then, he laid out what the diagnosis was. That's lymphoma. This is what lymphoma means. And I really think my outlook on my cancer and everything that I was going through after finding out I had cancer was really impacted by that doctor and how he delivered the news to
Mm.
me. I think I don't envy them for having to give that type of news, but this physician, he was also a person of color, and he also happened to be a Muslim. So, and this is why representation matters. It matters so much because he really just connected with me and my family. My mom was with me when he came in the room, and he was just so personable. He addressed both of us as a unit, and the way that he delivered the news was just from such an empathetic voice that it really just kind of put me at ease. It made me feel calm, and I think that set the tone for just my outlook as I started chemo right away and went through the rest of my treatments. I think that initial conversation and the way that he delivered it just really helped with my outlook.
Mhm. Yeah, and we often, I think, have a hard time cutting doctors slack, just because we do have these high expectations for them, and nobody expects to be dismissed or for doctors to use dismissive language. Or a lot of the people that I talk with on my show talk about medical gaslighting, like it's all in your head and there's nothing wrong with you and it's anxiety and all those phrases that patients might hear. They might not hear those words exactly, but the physicians in their minds, in the patient's minds, they're deducing that this is what the doctor is getting at or getting to. But the fact that there are so many different nuances from a cultural standpoint or religious standpoint, there's a lot of different um, religions out there that have different philosophies on healthcare and getting medical assistance and the need for a priest nearby or a shaman or whatever it might be. What could you say to physicians before they deliver any kind of news to, not that they know everything about you necessarily or your religious affiliation, but what do you think doctors could do to deliver news in a manner that is 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 a shock, but is maybe more digestible or easier to understand or easier to accept in some ways? What would you advise a physician if you could give that advice?
Yeah, you're asking the hard questions. And I honestly don't think there is a perfect way to deliver the news. You have cancer, or you have some kind of difficult illness or diagnosis that they're delivering to you, or prognosis as well. And it's a hard job. And I know, we do have to cut doctors some slack because it's hard to do that. And they're trying their best to do it the best way they possibly can. But I would say the first step is before you even get to the point of having to deliver a diagnosis, it's important to get to know the patient and to treat them like a human being, like a person. I think that's what was really missing when I was at the first hospital with that doctor. I didn't feel like I was a person. I kind of felt like I was a lab rat or just another like tick check box that he had to check off that he visited this patient. He didn't take any time to get to know me or my family, and it was a completely different experience when I transferred care to the other hospital where this other physician, I do think it helped that, he had a similar background, to my family, that he kind of felt that connection with us as well. But he took the time to actually get to know me. Like, he asked me, "So, like, what do you do in school?" Or, "What classes were you taking?" He would talk to my mom. I mentioned I have a big family, so my sisters would be there sometimes, my brothers would be there, my nephews, and he would talk to all of them, and he knew all of them by name. He knew everybody. So when he would come in, if I had someone different with me, than was with me the day before, he'd be like, "Oh, where's so and so? They're not here today." And it makes you feel like a person. It makes you feel like you matter to this doctor. And when you take that time to get to know the person, I think it helps when you're delivering difficult news because now you actually have this relationship where you see this person as a person. They see you as a person and not this, white coat, this person on a pedestal. Um, so I would say, yeah, it starts with that relationship building before you even get to the point of having to deliver some kind of difficult news to the person. And then when it does come to that point, I think it's important to take some time to educate yourself. Regardless of what the person's background is, we all have the capacity to learn cultural competency and try to understand what the patient's perspective might be. And again, this is why it's so important to get to know them first, because just because they look a certain way, they might not think a certain way. And that's why it's so important to talk. Like, when we talk about religions as well, it's a spectrum. You have some people who are, highly devoted, very religious. You have other people, regardless of what their religious identity is, they might not, hold to specific pieces of that faith. So it's important to get to know the individual. And then just come at it from that perspective that this is a person. Like that doctor who delivered the news to me, he's like, "I'm gonna talk to you like you're my sister, because
Oh,
if I was telling my sister this news, this is how I would share it with her." And I think reminding yourself of that as a physician delivering difficult news is, how would you want to hear this news? Or how would someone that you love and care about want to hear this news, and try to deliver it with that same um, compassion that you would for someone that you care about.
uh-huh. Yeah. Wow. So now you're in this other institution and you get this diagnosis and you are in treatment like it was all just coming in hot for you. The diagnosis and the treatment plan. And how did you so you had chemo, right?
Mhm.
So how did you prepare how were you prepared for that and from the clinical staff? And how did you maybe prepare for that mentally, even if at all? How do you think about things like that? You get this cancer diagnosis and now you're having chemotherapy and probably even at a young age, you've probably heard what chemotherapy might be like for someone. What what are you doing to prepare?
Yeah, I would say, I didn't have much time to prepare for that first chemo session because I had to kinda start essentially right away. It was basically I found out my diagnosis, I had my first chemo a few days later. So I didn't have much time to think about it, and I was really sick. I was so sick by that point, I could barely get out of bed. So I do remember, like, I have vague memories of, the clinical team coming in and walking me through what my chemo regimen is, what it means, what I probably would feel. But I was so sick that I didn't retain any of that. And that's just the nature of it, when you are a young patient and you have that delayed diagnosis, by the time you're finding about this, you are just so in such a weakened state, and it's hard to keep track of what anyone is telling you. So when I had that first chemo, I really wasn't well prepared. Like I said, they tried to give me the information. I was just too sick to retain any of it. And I think my family was in such a whirlwind trying to understand what was going on that they didn't fully understand it either. It wasn't until I got discharged from the hospital, and this was after I had my first chemo, that I was at home, and things are now starting to slow down a little bit before my next chemo session, that it kind of hit me of, oh, this is actually real. This is actually happening. And I remember I was told that I would need to have 6 cycles of chemo, and I didn't fully understand what that meant. I thought that meant I just have to have 6 chemo infusions and that's it. I didn't realize that cycles meant, like, there's, like, a pause in between and how many actual infusions I'd be getting. I didn't fully understand it. So I remember I was sitting with my sister and we were like, "Oh, see, it's not that bad. Like, see, this is 6, you already had 2, so you only have 4 more, and then you're done." And we're, like, laughing about it in bed that, "Oh, yeah, that's not bad at all. We're gonna be done so quickly." And then later, when I came in for my next appointment and we're talking about the rest of my treatment schedule, then I realized, "Oh, wait, like, there's actually 2 infusions per cycle, and, this is what it's gonna look like. It's not gonna be as quick and fast as I thought." Um, so it did take some time for me to fully understand what it all meant. I really leaned on my healthcare team for that education. I tried my best to avoid Googling. So I would come to them with questions about, what side effects I should be expecting, and, how to manage some of those. I think the one that I was probably least prepared for is the hair loss.
Oh, well.
Plus, oftentimes people are like, well, it's just your hair in the grand scheme of things. Like, it doesn't matter as much as your health. But what I didn't realize is when they talk about hair loss from chemo, it's not just the hair on your head, it's all of the hair on your body, like
Mhm.
my eyebrows, my eyelashes. And that I was not prepared for that. I prepared myself to be bald. I didn't prepare myself to have no hair at all. And I think that was really hard because, you're sick, you're going through this hard thing, and now you don't even look like yourself. And I remember I had very long hair when I started chemo, and my mom really didn't want me to have to cut it, and she helped me cut it short, like chin length. It was a cute little bob cut, but, it got to the point where I just stopped brushing my hair because I could feel it was just clumps of loose hair, and if I brushed it, it would all fall out, and it was kind of traumatizing, and I finally I was talking to my sisters about it. I was like, "We have to do something about it because I don't wanna even touch my hair anymore." And we found this amazing, hairstylist. He would actually visit, patients at the hospital, to do their hair, and his name is John Krager. Anyone in the Chicago area, I would recommend, looking him up. He's wonderful. So he has a salon, he has a section specifically for cancer patients where you can get your privacy, you have your own room, you can have your family and friends there, and he, shaved my head for me, but he did it in a way that made it so fun, where he would slowly cut it shorter and shorter and show me like, "Oh, this is a fun hairstyle you can do when it's growing back," and he just made it less traumatizing, and it was nice to kinda get some control back of choosing to shave off the rest of my hair as opposed to letting the chemo let it all fall out. But I think that was just one part that physically I wasn't prepared to just see how different I would look after, as I was going through these treatments.
Not because at 19, or were you still 19 at that point?
Yeah.
At 19, like most girls, I suppose, I sorta remember 19, but it's all about your hair and makeup and beauty and fashion and all those things, and for women just overall, there's just something about our hair that, women who have breast cancer or have had, ovarian or uterine cancer and unfortunately have to have full hysterectomies and full mastectomies. Luckily, with a mastectomy, if you wanted to have reconstruction, you can have it. So regaining some of that womanhood, if you will, is certainly possible. Hair, I know people say it'll grow back, but it takes a long time for hair to grow back. My gosh. So, how are your I'm really interested in how your friends are reacting to things at this point with you, and now you have lost your hair, and you're a different you on the outside. So, how are your friends reacting to that?
Yeah, I would say my core group of friends were amazing. They were actually there in the hospital, like, even before I found out I had cancer. They would come visit me, bringing me my favorite foods and treats, so they were truly amazing, and they would after I found out I had cancer and I was going through chemo, they were constantly there, like, over my house, just spending time with me and just being with me regardless of how I felt. Like, I remember one time, my friend came over and she baked me my favorite brownies, and we put on a movie, and I was just so sick that I fell asleep, and they just stayed there. Like, I'm sitting there sleeping, and they just stayed, and just having that presence there, knowing that, I'm not going through this alone was so important. I think it was really hard for them too. Like, I know we talked about this after the fact, like, after I was all better, and this was years later, and we talked about how emotionally difficult it was for them too. Like, these were friends that I've had since grade school, so we knew each other for a long time. Like, really, they were like a second family to me. And, um, one of my best friends, she told me that, she was there in the hospital after we found out it was cancer, and she was leaving, and she was walking back to her car, and the whole walk back, she was crying. 'Cause she didn't know what was gonna happen or yeah, it's hard, and I think we as patients, obviously, we have it hard because we're going through it, but our family and our friends are going through it too in a different way, and it was really challenging for them. I will say I did have some friends that kinda dropped off, just because they didn't know how to react. This is something that as a young person, you don't experience. You shouldn't have to experience it. And it was hard for them. It was hard for them to have to deal with something so real. And I think just because of that, they kind of slowly trickled away. They would check in once in a while, and then eventually I just stopped hearing from them. And I don't blame them for that. As a patient, we don't have the choice to walk away from what we're going through. But as a friend, as someone on the outside, you do have that choice. And at the end of the day, I think you find who matters most and who the most important people are, and those are the ones that stick around, and I was lucky that I did have some amazing friends who've been with me through it all, even now to this day. Like, now it's been I just celebrated my, 14-year cancerversary on May 5th,
Wow.
Cinco de Mayo.
Aw, congratulations.
Thanks.
You still look like you're 19. I would never
I
guess
know, I hear
listening this.
I get that all the time.
Look, you're gonna
Thank you.
use that when you're my age and it's in your 50s and beyond. Take it. Take it.
No, thank you.
Aw.
I was just gonna say that it's been so long now since I was diagnosed and went through all of this, but I'm still really going through it. Cancer is one of those things that it really sticks with you even if you're in remission. Like, thankfully, I have been in remission. It didn't relapse, and, that all has been good, but I'm at the point now where I'm experiencing those long-term effects from the
Mhm.
treatments that you went through, and I think that's another aspect that makes that AYA cancer experience so different, is that, we're young when we go through this, and thankfully, a lot of us do get to that long-term survivorship phase, but we have our whole lives ahead of us after cancer, and we have more of that time for the diagnosis and the treatments that we went through to impact us later and into our adulthood as well. Like, I'm at the point now where I found out that my fertility was impacted by my treatments, and I was told that that might be a challenge early on, but when you're 19, that's not top of mind, and again, I had to start treatment right away, so we really didn't have time to do any type of fertility preservation then, but I found out now, and I have been able to do some fertility preservation now, thankfully, but it's just, it's the gift that keeps on giving, and there's other health issues that I've been dealing with that all have kind of stemmed from going through this at such a young age, and, um, I think it's important to still have that support at that point too, and I feel like it's even more so challenging now that I am so far out because everyone kind of expects you to be better,
Mhm.
like, cancer shouldn't be your whole world, 14 years later, but it
Yeah.
still is, and it has impacted me so much. I mean, I've turned it into my career, but just physically from a health standpoint, it's something that's still impacting me, and, I'm lucky that I still have people who, can check in on me and I can talk to about some of these things, but there are those people that just don't get it.
When when did you realize that there were gaps in the healthcare system for young people with cancer?
I would say probably really right from my diagnosis, essentially, and, like, kinda starting chemo and going through that as a 19-year-old. I think the first thing I realized is we're not talking about where I am in my life. We're talking about my chemo, we're talking about my health and everything that we need to go through, but we're not talking about what are my values? Do I want to be able to still go to my classes? How can I still do that? Those are all things I started advocating for because it was important to me, and I started asking those questions. But it wasn't something that was being talked about regularly. And the side effects as well, I would say that probably is something that came more to my forefront as I started wrapping up my treatments and I started thinking about what life is gonna look like now that I don't have to have chemo anymore, and in my head, I was envisioning it being me going right back to where I was before I found out I had cancer, and obviously that's not how it worked out, and as I started to see how hard it was to figure out my life after cancer, like getting back to normal or figuring out the new normal, that's when I realized this is a gap.
Mm.
Talking about the side effects and how it plays in your life as a young person is so important, and that was something that was not being talked about at that time. Since then, survivorship care plans have gained a lot of traction and gained a lot of popularity. It's still not a standard where all treatment centers provide a survivorship care plan, but it's becoming more popular now. And what if you're not aware of what a survivorship care plan is, it is a summary of your diagnosis, all the treatments that you've gone through, what side effects you can expect, at to different time points in your life, who to contact for certain issues, what follow-up care you need to have. So it is a huge document that just summarizes everything you could possibly need to know as you enter survivorship as a cancer survivor. And it is such an important tool in helping us as survivors to advocate for ourselves and to get the support that we need. I didn't get a survivorship care plan when I finished treatment because it wasn't a thing back then. But I had to ask for one when I learned that survivorship care plans was a thing, and this was a few years ago. And my treatment center, they created a survivorship care plan for me, and they have a great survivorship clinic where now I get to go once a year. I have a checkup at the survivorship clinic, and um, it's your opportunity to talk about everything that you're going through and figuring out if there's um, different follow-ups that you need. Like, that's how I found out about my fertility and that I could get fertility preservation now as an adult even after going through cancer treatments. It's how I started, taking care of my heart health more. I It turns out that my, chemo impacted my heart health now, and I've been able to keep better track of that so I can try to protect my heart more and make sure I'm taking care of it, so as I do continue to get older, we could try to mitigate some of those effects. So it's just I think that survivorship phase probably is where a lot of it started becoming more clear that there's a lot that can be done and needs to be done for AYAs in the cancer space.
Mhm. What do you think about this word survivor?
Yeah, it's
This
a
this
it's a hard
this label of survivors.
yeah. Labels, I think, get thrown a lot in the cancer space. We hear fighter, we hear warrior. I think survivor is one that I don't have as much of a problem with. I never liked being called a warrior or a fighter because it makes it kind of implies that you had a choice or
Mm.
that if you were sick, that means you didn't fight hard enough, and I don't think that's the case at all. So survivor, when I was diagnosed, I had somebody tell me, and I actually think it might have been someone at Stupid Cancer, that, you're a survivor from the point of diagnosis because you have cancer and you're living with it. It's not something that comes because you finish treatment or because you're in remission. You're a survivor from the point of diagnosis, and I think that is something that really impacted me, and I liked that definition of it so much because it's true. It's something that you're living with. It's not a label that you earn because you made it to the other side or because you fought hard enough. It's something that anyone who is diagnosed with cancer is. They're a survivor because they're living with this. It's something that you have. And I think that's a label I would say I don't mind as much as some of the other labels.
Mhm. Yeah, and so when you're talking with young patients, because you're volunteer through AYA, is that right?
Yeah, so it's I volunteer in the AYA space a lot. With AYA's Take Chicago, I've spoken with at them. I speak at different conferences and events, and then I also do a lot of advocacy just in my work. So at the American Brain Tumor Association, for example, I'm leading our AYA initiative to focus specifically on the unique needs of brain tumor patients who are AYAs. So, we talk about AYA in the cancer space in general, but when you focus on a specific disease space, you realize there's so many different nuances. Like when you think about brain tumors, that's something that's impacting your brain. And going through it at a young age, it can impact their cognition, their development. And it's such a different experience going through it as a young patient as well. And it's something that hasn't been talked about as much. I would say AYA cancer advocacy in general, it really has um, taken up in the past decade, but AYA advocacy in the brain tumor space really hasn't come to the forefront until probably the past 3 or 4 years. So
Mhm.
it's something that is still lacking, and that's what I'm trying to be able to bring more awareness to in the work that I'm doing now.
Mhm. Yeah, because how do you even start a conversation with a young person who's been diagnosed with cancer about what survivorship even means. You're going through, of course, there's, pediatric patients and babies at birth are being diagnosed with glioblastomas and all of that. But how do you talk to a young person doing some very adult things about survivorship?
Yeah, well, I think, when we think about AYAs, they are older than than younger children, so you're able to have some of those real conversations with them. And what's most important is giving them as much control and as much autonomy as possible because they've had so much control and independence taken away from them. So I mentioned earlier on that it's important to meet patients where they're at. And I think that's where it comes in terms of survivorship and talking about survivorship and these labels too is asking them how they define it. How do you, as a young patient, define survivorship, or what does survivorship mean to you? And then really tailoring the conversation from there, because I think it's so important to talk to the individual and find out what's important to them and how they view things, and then use that to start that conversation and talk about the next steps. Because for me, you know, I love that definition of being a survivor from the point of diagnosis, but for somebody else, it might not be as impactful. They may define it differently. So it's important to talk to them about how they define it and what's important to them.
Oh, uh-huh. So is your cancerversary from the day of your diagnosis, or if it was it from when you finished treatment? I think it's different for everybody.
Yeah, I'll say I actually celebrate both dates. So,
Mhm.
May 5th was the day that I finished chemo, so that's, I mark that day as, like, my celebratory cancerversary, and then November 12th is the day I was diagnosed,
Mhm.
and I like to celebrate that too, because we've been through such a difficult experience as patients, as cancer patients. And I think finding more ways to take some of these dark and difficult moments and turn it into a celebration is important. And yeah, I'm going to be selfish and I'm going to give myself as many days to celebrate as I can. So, on the 12th, I tend to do something more like laid back. Like I remember, my first, um, cancerversary from the day I was diagnosed, I had saved all my hospital bands from all the times that I've had to go to the hospital, and we did, like, a big bonfire,
Oh,
and my friends were there, my family was there, and we passed everybody got a hospital band because I had so many, and we would all say, like, whatever we wanted, like a 1 word or, like, a sentence or something, and then throw it into the fire and burn it, and that was a way that we kind of, like, celebrated that moment because yeah, it was hard and it sucked finding out that I had cancer, and it was like a therapeutic moment to celebrate it that way. And then for the cancerversary where, I finished treatment, I tend to celebrate it more as like a fun celebration, like going out with friends or just doing something fun.
what what advice would you give someone who is newly diagnosed? Because you are so much for self-advocacy. What would you say to a young person with a new diagnosis in terms of speaking up for themselves and giving them the permission to do that?
Yeah. I would say self-awareness is so important, and as an AYA, I think self-awareness is something that we're just starting to get. So when you are diagnosed, that sometimes goes away or you are not focused on your self-awareness as much. But it is important. I said early on in our conversation that you are the expert when it comes to yourself and when it comes to your body. And taking that time to really get to know yourself. What is most important to you? What matters to you when you think about your care, your life, your day to day? And write it down and really take that time to get acquainted with yourself because that is what's going to help you better advocate for yourself and understand what your needs are so that you could speak up for those needs. As a young person, when I was diagnosed, I was constantly moving, right? Before I found out I had cancer, I was constantly doing something, going from class to class or whatever it was. I never took the time to slow down and just sit with myself, and that is one of the gifts that cancer gave me.
Mm.
It was a horrible experience, don't wish it on anybody, but one thing that it gave me was that opportunity to slow down and sit with myself and really take that time to understand what was important to me.
Mm.
And I think that's probably one piece of advice I would share with someone who is newly diagnosed is you're going through a whirlwind, you're going through so many changes all at once, so much uncertainty, so much fear, but take that time to just pause and remember who you are and really get to know yourself because that will define what your cancer experience looks like and what your survivorship looks like.
How do you even find time for yourself to even stop and think because you're so involved with AYA and then you're working for the Brain Tumor Association and you are a survivor. How do you find the time to just decompress or avoid burnout yourself? And yet still you're there for everyone. How do you take care of you?
Yeah, it's hard sometimes. I think it's important to just make take those small pockets of time where you can. Self-care doesn't have to be this grandiose thing where, you're going to the spa. It can literally be 5 minutes. Maybe I start my day with that where I'll just take 5 minutes before I turn on my laptop and jump into work. It's just taking those 5 minutes to maybe take that extra time to make myself a cup of coffee and I can just sit down and relax and just enjoy my own time. Or when I do get breaks, making sure I'm doing what I can to take care of myself. Something that helps me is going on walks. And now in Chicago, now that the weather is getting a little bit nicer. So when it is nice, taking just the short walk around the block, getting that time to just step away and turn off, the part of me that is a social worker that wants to be there for everybody else's problems and just to like hit pause on that for a moment and just, listen to the sounds of the birds outside and take that time to just decompress is important. So it's really finding those small pockets of times where you can just unplug, not think about all the world's problems and just focus on yourself. And I will add, I bring up my family so much because my family is so important to me. I have a lot of nieces and nephews, and they are a huge stress reliever for me. So taking that time to just focus on them and play with them and see the world through a kid's eyes, unaffected, innocent, and just get to have that fun is one way that I try to decompress and unplug from it.
Yeah, because you have to. I mean, like, going back to the conversation about the physician who has to deliver not the best of news quite often to a patient, and they are probably figuring out ways to decompress also and try to compartmentalize what their day-to-day looks like and not take it home with them or not be heavy on their souls for the whole day or however long that would last. Because I think I mentioned to you that I moderate market research for healthcare and pharma companies for a living, and I interview a lot of patients and, of course, doctors. So I hear from physicians the unmet needs and their treatment algorithms for different diseases. And, it's very business, of course. And then I talk with patients, and this is where I just feel the weight of their world. And even for me, not being a clinician or any type of licensed healthcare professional, I have to find my own time to kind of shake it off a little bit because there's few patients that I've gone to bed thinking about and still wonder about to this day. But yeah, you have to have empathy, but it's not happening to you now or whatever it is, whoever it is you're trying to counsel. So you do have to remove yourself in some way for a little bit to keep yourself sane. Yeah. And being able to continue to help people. So you're so right about having to just stop and listen to birds, have the coffee, whatever it might be. Um, Ambreen, I have to ask you, did anyone ever go back to that initial physician, that infectious disease doctor, to say, hey, you are really far off on this diagnosis? Did it ever get back to him?
That is, like, my biggest regret is that we never did that, and I really wish that we did. It was just everything happened so quickly after that point. My diagnosis, starting chemo right away and going through all of that, that we didn't forget about it. We knew that it happened, and, we still talk about it to this day, but we just didn't have the time and the
Mhm.
bandwidth to go back to it or to focus on that because everyone was so focused on getting me healthy and getting me to where I needed to be, and that was the top priority. So, no, we never went back, and I really wish we did, and, I did after a few years later, I was going back to medical records, I was trying to find the name of that doctor because I really just wanted to, want him to know.
Yeah, get him a link to the recording here. But Ambreen, it just seems like so much has come full circle for you. And again, I can feel the passion. And what would you say was that one experience in your journey that said to you, being a doctor is not where I want my career to go. I'm switching to social work. What was that, or was there one episode or one situation that flipped the switch for you?
Yeah, I think it wasn't really one moment, it was a collection of smaller moments that once I added it all up, it just made sense,
Mm.
and, like I said, I didn't it didn't click for me right away because I did go back thinking, "Okay, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna try to become a doctor." But what happened was, I started getting engaged with more cancer advocacy organizations like Stupid Cancer, Amberman Angels, um, and I started volunteering with them and being around these people who are so passionate about these missions, but providing that psychosocial support, more, not just support for you from a healthcare standpoint, from a medical standpoint, but the rest of you, because, it's not just your body, it's your mind, your life, the people around you that are impacted by cancer, and I think there are amazing doctors out there. There are incredible doctors, there are incredible treatment centers, but what we need more of is the people who will advocate for everything else in your
Mm.
life, all the other pieces that make you who you are outside of just your physical health, and I think being around so many people who are so passionate about that, over time, I realized that I loved that work and that that is something that we need more of. We need more people who are passionate about cancer patients and survivors and caregivers as well, beyond just their physical health.
Mm.
Because we know that cancer doesn't just impact your body, it's impacting your entire life. And I guess just being in that space more made me realize that is something I was so much more passionate about than, being someone who's delivering a diagnosis or creating a treatment plan or delivering those treatments. That's important too. I just felt like there was a greater need and I felt a stronger calling towards being able to fill some of that quality of life aspect of it too.
So was that the main silver lining for you, Amber, or is there something else out of this whole experience?
Ooh, the silver lining. I would say the silver lining for me really is after going through this, having to go through something so traumatic and being where I am now, so many years later, I'm doing well, I'm feeling strong, I feel more educated, I know so much more, is taking that experience, looking back at where I was when I was 19 and not knowing any of what I know now, and using that to support somebody else. I think that's the silver lining to me is that I know more now, and I wanna take what I know so that I can reach out to the next Umbrian who's a 19-year-old, going through this, who is where I was, where, I was kinda in that black hole of just not knowing anything, and being able to support them through it
Mhm.
is my silver lining, I guess, and I know not everyone can do that, not everybody makes cancer their career and their life, but it's what has helped me I've gone through, and it's so rewarding when I'm able to talk to somebody else who is going through the same thing now and being able to give them the support that I wish that I had when I was first diagnosed and, those the tips that you really don't get unless you've been through it firsthand.
Yeah, like Matt says, there's really no playbook to having cancer. So it means so much to have other people around you who can support you and talk through what their experience was like. And you still have to, of course, make your own decisions for yourself or do your own research or not, or avoid Google. Like you said, you didn't go home and Google right away. And there's a double-edged sword, of course, to doing that. I get it. I've done it myself more than I should. Um, but truly, I've just loved talking with you and so glad you were able to make it on the show and talk us through your journey and all that you're doing with your advocacy. It's just so impressive and so amazing that you're doing what you're doing. And I'll make sure to put any links in the show notes if there's a contact information for you or an email or whatnot. Happy to put that in. Any final thoughts before we wrap up here?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Laura, for creating this space where people like myself can share our experiences and others can hear the stories. Because I think that's what's most important is talking about what we've been through so that the next person can hear it and get that validation and know that they're not the only ones going through this. So I think it's so important. I think you've created such a beautiful platform to amplify those voices. And I will just share, if there are any brain tumor patients or families that are listening, I do encourage you to check out the American Brain Tumor Association for resources and support. We're here to help provide you with education, help link you to resources that may benefit you. We have peer support, lots of great support available on our website, abta.org. And if you don't know what you need or you just want to talk about what you're going through, I would encourage you to reach out. You'll get to talk to an actual person. You can call us at 1-800-886-2282 or email us at info@abta.org, and we'd be happy to talk you through your diagnosis and help get you the support that you need.
That's amazing. Those are some really special resources that the association is offering. And how about AYA? How do
Yeah,
people get
yeah.
in touch
So
with folks there?
right, so I'm leading our AYA initiative for brain tumor patients. Currently, we have a virtual support group. We're calling them virtual brain tumor meetups that we're hosting once a month, and it's a space for you to come if you're between the ages of 18 and 39 and you have a brain tumor or had one to come just meet other people who are exactly like you, going through the same thing. We'll be doing some fun activities, we'll provide some psychoeducation, but most importantly, we'll be using that time just to connect and get to meet other people who are going through the same thing. And, Laura, I can share the link, for that for patients to sign up and to check out some of our educational content too. We have our webinar series where we address issues that are applicable to AYAs like, living with a brain tumor, survivorship, fertility planning. We also have our national conference that's coming up in September. It's here in the Chicago area in Schaumburg, September 12th through 14th. And it's live streamed as well for anyone who can't make it in person.
Oh, cool.
Registration is open, so you can find out more at our website and register. It's a great event. It's 2.5 days. We'll cover a variety of topics, like talking to your children, coping with grief, sexual health and intimacy is one topic that we're covering at this year's national conference. That is definitely a hot topic and important. So check it out. You can see the program on our website, and I hope that you can attend because it's just a great opportunity to once again not be the odd one out. You go there and we have I think last year we had a little over 300 people in person, we had 1,000 people online, and they all are brain tumor patients in families. Brain tumors, it's a rare disease, but there's a lot of patients and families out there, and being able to be in that space where everyone is going through the same thing or has been through the same thing is so important. So,
Sure.
it's a unique conference, and I attend if they can in person or at least virtually so they can get to experience that.
Yeah, and there's so many different kinds of tumors as well. Yesterday, which would have been May 19th, I was downtown at the Merchandise Mart at Matter. I don't know if you've been down to
Mhm.
Matter, the healthcare incubator.
Yeah.
They had the whole innovation summit on brain health, and it was mostly around movement disorders. But I learned that there's 20 different kinds of epileptic seizures. So, again, so many different kinds of brain tumors that require different treatment, different kinds of support, have different side effects, different parts of the brain. I mean, it's really multifactorial. So, Ambreen, thank you so much for talking us through your journey and the way you have just you're like this little phoenix that has risen. And you're here for all of us and for those who need you. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, you're too kind. I love that. Describing me like a phoenix. Thank you so much, Laura.
Well, thank you for being here, Ambreen, and everyone. Thanks so much for listening. Stay well and keep pushing for answers. Oh my goodness, that's a wrap on another compelling story. Thanks for listening to the Desperate for a Diagnosis podcast. If you would like more information about today's guests or to find out more about Laura, go to desperateforadiagnosis.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow show updates and healthcare news on the podcast's Facebook page. If you would like to be a guest on the show, or if you have any questions, advice, or suggestions for our guests, please email me at lauramarie@desperateforadiagnosis.com. Please note, I am not a medical professional, nor am I affiliated with any healthcare, pharmaceutical, or device company. I am an entrepreneur and an independent market researcher focused on helping healthcare organizations better understand the patient perspective. The podcast is not meant to offer medical advice, but to merely share the stories and perspectives of podcast guests.